Okay, so now we are at towards the end of our lecture. This is the second last. So this week is the application of fermentation in food products, which is the first part, and the second part is the final one. Okay, so in this topic we will try to understand the fermentation process in different types of food. Okay, so basically, between us, foods and microorganisms, we have a very long and interesting association. Okay, microbial activity can lead to either food spoilage or food preservation, and this can be controlled if we understand the microbial interaction. For example, in soy sauce, if we reduce the pH of the soy sauce up to certain pH, we actually can direct the fermentation of soybean into the preservation instead of food spoilage. So this activity, they are depending on the food available nutrients. For example, if they are rich in carbohydrate, protein, or fat, the type of microorganism involved, I think this is the most important part. So if the spoilage microorganism, for example, Clostridium botulinum, um, grow, they will cause food spoilage. But if good microorganism is used, for example, we use starter culture, they will preserve the food instead. And the last one, the food storage condition. Okay, of course, if you let the food in the room temperature, microorganism can grow more and cause the food spoilage and so on. Food with large quantities of carbohydrate will show spoilage through fungal growth. Usual, for example, the mold on the bread, but minimal major orders. But if the food is rich in protein and fat, they will produce more orders, but probably the visual is less. Okay? The process we can call them as putrefaction for protein and rancidity for fat. Okay, like I said, if it is rich in protein and the protein degradation is occurring, the process is putrefaction, but high in fats will become rancid, and both of these processes can cause a very faulty smell, and also the taste will be very weird for the food. Microbial toxins are sometimes produced during the food spoilage, for example, aflatoxin by Aspergillus flavus. Okay, and this aflatoxin is known to cause cancer in humans. Microbial transformed foods that are consumed by man are called fermented food. These are the good microbes that are growing in the food. Microbial transformed specific substrates can lead to the production of useful industrial compounds such as food ingredients. Food can be preserved by a variety of methods. These include the first one, we can remove or reduce the number of microorganisms through certain processes, for example, filtration, centrifugation, and avoidance of contamination. Means that you use sterile techniques. Second, you inactivate the spoilage enzyme, for example, the PPO, the browning enzyme. Third, we can preserve the food by keeping the food in low temperature storage, for example, freezing. Then we can do high temperature processing, for example, boiling, steaming, canning, and so on. Lastly, we can reduce the water activity by reducing the water availability. For example, we can dry the food, adding of solutes like salt or sugar. Okay, so that's why sometimes a very food that contain like high amount of sugar, that up to the point they can reduce the water activity, they can last longer. Okay, they can also be preserved by adding chemicals. Okay, non-thermal processing, for example, radiation and UV and irradiation, addition of antimicrobial products such as bacteriocins. Okay, this one is common. For example, the penicillin is considered as bacteriocins, but usually they are used in pharmaceutical product. And finally, we can use fermentation. It means we use a good microorganism to outgrow the bad microorganism. Okay, there are many benefits when raw product materials are fermented. The first one, it can be better acceptability. This is depending on the person. For example, if you don't like belacan, so means that they are not better for you. But certain people, they like belacan, so it is a better acceptability. It can change the appearance, form, and other sensory products or sensory attributes. For example, the belacan, it is completely different from the fresh prawns. They can increase shelf life and stability because the good bacteria can outgrow the bad bacteria. They can also provide a greater number of food varieties. Then they can be more nutritious because they will be breakdown of products. So for example, the anti-nutrients can be breakdown into something that is less harmful. Also, they can release certain nutrients such as mineral, vitamins, and antioxidants. They also contain lots of good bacteria which can serve as probiotic in your gut. So it is good for your gut health. So this is the classification of fermented food. The first one is ready for consumption, for example yogurt. The second one is ready for consumption but mostly used as ingredient, for example sour cream. Then the last one is only used as ingredient, for example soy sauce. So these stages, for the first one, it contains the microorganism that we consume. Second one, they don't have the microorganism anymore because it's already been removed or been killed during the process. And the last one, the microbe is only used during the early step of production, and then there will be other processes that is required to complete the product. Okay? The microorganisms used, they are usually bacteria in the form of LAB. They can be mold, yeast, and other bacterial fermentation. They can also be enzymatic fermentation, means they don't have any microorganism, they just use the enzyme or enzyme that is produced from the microorganism. In the production of some fermented products, starter culture are prepared first, okay, to initiate the fermentation. So in order for us to start fermentation and we don't want the bad bacteria to grow first, we can use the starter culture. Okay. It is used to aid in saccharification of starch. This means that we break the starch into smaller components in the form of disaccharide or monosaccharide. Then the sugar can be used to produce either alcohol or lactic acid. Okay, alcohol fermentation, for example, beer and so on. Lactic acid fermentation can be, for example, yogurt, yeast, and so on. Okay, so this is the first example. You can use this technique to produce beer, and the second one, we can use this technique to produce other type of fermented food. For example, in Chinese, Korean, koji in Japanese, ragi in Malaysia, and so on. Okay. In Japan, the starter culture is usually known as koji, but sometimes koji can be referred to as Aspergillus oryzae. But the meaning is actually the bloom of mold. Okay, different products require different structure culture. So koji, although usually is referred to Aspergillus oryzae, it can also mean another thing depending on the organism that we use. Okay, starter culture are the sources of microorganism for fermentation and enzymes for substrate degradation. Okay, so apart from the direct action by the microorganism, they can also produce enzymes to degrade the substrate. The main enzymes found in elimination ragi and koji are hemolytic, means they react on the carbohydrate, proteolytic, react on the protein, and lipolytic, react on the lipid. Okay, the first example of fermentation is on legumes. They have high protein followed by lipid and carbohydrate. Okay, fermentation results in extensive hydrolysis of protein and carbohydrate, okay, caused by the activities of enzyme produced by the microorganism involved in the fermentation process. Example of legumes, this one, soybean is the most common one, groundnut, black gram, African locust, and so on. Okay, one of the most famous application of legumes in fermentation is the production of soy sauce. Okay, as you can see here, soy sauce, they contain a lot of salt. This salt is what contribute to the salty taste of the soy sauce, and because why we need to add this salt, because we want to avoid from the growing of bad microorganism. The microorganism that we use in this process is Aspergillus oryzae, the initial one. And this Aspergillus oryzae, they can live in high salt condition. So by adding salt, we avoid the growing of bad microorganism, but we promote the growth of Aspergillus oryzae. Okay, during growth, okay, this organism, they have plenty of other organisms during the ripening of the soy sauce. They can produce enzymes such as lipase, protease, and amylase. Okay, if we want to improve the texture of the soy, we can add additional enzymes such as protease. Okay, there are three types of soy sauce. The first one is shoyu, the blend of different substrate. Second, made from only soybean. And third, teriyaki sauce can be thicker, and other type of soy sauce and include other ingredients. We add additional ingredients in teriyaki. That's why they are usually sweeter, I would say. Okay. Producing countries include Japan, China, and many Southeast Asian countries. For example, Malaysia as well. It can be used as seasoning and condiment. So this is the production of soy sauce. As you can see during the production, so we will add the koji here to form mesh. This koji is usually in the form of Aspergillus oryzae, and during the fermentation, other good bacteria and yeast will also develop, okay, after we add the koji. Okay, and then we ripen to get the flavor and aroma that is usually associated with soy sauce. Okay, next one, still legumes. Okay, we'll take another example, which is tempeh, which is a famous Indonesian food made from soybean as well. So usually it is a whole soybean, but sometimes it can be mixed with other grains such as rice. I've never tasted this one so far. Okay, and then they are fermented into a rich cake using the starter culture. But in Indonesian and Malay, we call this one as ragi, the starter culture. Okay, so it can be cooked with turmeric and so on. Microorganisms involved in the fermentation include Rhizopus or Ligosporus. This is the most common one, but they can also use other Rhizopus species as well. This microorganism can produce enzyme like protease during the fermentation, which can hydrolyze the soybean protein. Lipase produced by microorganism often hydrolyze over 30% of the oil in the soybean. So they also produce lipase enzyme apart from protease. Prolonged fermentation will result in ammonia production, which is not very good for the product. Okay, so there will be a sweet time for the tempeh to taste good. Okay, I think the ammonia production comes from the protein content inside the soybean. Okay, so this is the process. You can read it yourself. Okay, this is other type of legumes. For example, natto in Japan. This one in Japan as well. Miso, mostly they are from Japan. Because Japan, they are very famous for their fermented food. Okay, so for cereal, we have several examples. For example, tapai, okay, wheat, usually from India, China, and so on. Maize from South Africa, Ghana, and other types of food, which is not very common to us except for beer. Okay, we will continue in the next lecture for cereals. Thank you.